Hey everybody, today we have a 4-point small sort of saga game today of Normans versus Anglo-Danish. Essentially, we are using the rules from the basic rulebook and not from any sort of facts or anything like that, just straight out of the basic rulebook. This scenario, they looked fairly doable. We do oftentimes use the fact in certain scenarios, but we just are going straight out of the original saga rulebook. Now, we have essentially the scenario, the challenge today, and the way that deployment sort of worked out with the way rolling happened is we have the primary bulk of the Norman force right here. So we have a warrior unit with crossbows, we have a Hearthguard unit, we have a levy unit with bows, and we have another Hearthguard unit. But then we have in front of them the actually Anglo-Danish warlord in the center, and then we have the Norman warlord on a horse. Then we have a large unit of Hearthguard, a unit of warriors, and another unit of warriors. So I'll come back at I suppose the end of round 1, and we'll see how things go. Hey everybody, we are at the end of round 1. Anglo-Danes essentially went first. All the units except this warrior unit on the top right here for the Anglo-Danes attacked the warlord of the Normans, which is now in that spot, but he was actually a lot closer. That's what's generated this fatigue in most cases next to all of these guys. And then the Anglo-Dane warlords over here at the present moment. But all three of them attacked. In doing that, 2 wounds were suffered against the 12 that Norman warlord has to start. And during the... no real special abilities were actually played by the Anglo-Danes during the attack turn. During the Normans' turn, initially the massed volley ability was used by the levies, and at the time there was actually line of sight, like this wasn't here, but that was used to shoot at the warriors here, which it doubled their range. They ended up killing 1 warrior in the process. Beyond that, the gallop special rule was played, which allowed these Hearthguard to essentially come up. And I guess for Normans, they're actually called knights. Sorry, that's just a habit of mine playing Vikings a lot. And so the knights came up and did attack the warlord. And the warlord suffered 1 wound through that process and ended up not killing any of the 4 knights. And then the Norman warlord did sort of reposition to go back this way towards his army. The Anglo-Danish did use the intimidation special rule to prevent the crossbowmen warriors, and I guess they're called sergeants for Normans, to stay where they're at and not come any closer. And then some more knights actually came up around this way. And so we had a bit of fighting, a bit of repositioning, and now we're going into round 2. Hey everybody, we are at the end of round 2. We've had a very sort of interesting round. The Anglo-Danes really didn't do much as far as offensively. They rested up all of their units, and the warlord repositioned himself back. He did not rest. And then the other units positioned themselves forward, excuse me. And the rest of their dice were actually put on defensive reactive abilities. Now, the Normans essentially had a couple of rounds of shooting from their warrior sergeants with the crossbows, and fired into the Danes, and ended up the Normans generated fatigue because of their shooting, but they ended up and even though it was used against them, they still ended up killing 2 warriors. So that was successful. Now the Norman warlord as well as the knights rested here, and these knights ended up using the charge ability and charging into these warriors. These warriors used the shield wall ability And in the process, and just due to dice rolling, that charge was repelled and 3 knights were killed and only 1 warrior was killed from the Danes. Because of that ability, that last knight also has an extra fatigue. Lastly, after resting, the warlord did attempt to charge in, or attempt to actually not charge in, but attempt to attack with its abilities to allow another knight unit go with him once per turn. And once that was declared, the Danes did an intimidation where all of these warriors sort of intimidated them and they decided against it. And so that's where we end at round 2. See you at the end of round 3. Okay, we're at the end of round 3. Saw lots of action this round, but no warlord on warlord fighting or anybody attacking the warlords. Essentially, in the Anglo-Danish turn, the warriors that were in this spot here attacked the knights that were here, got wiped out, but they used the Lords of Battle, which put 3 fatigue on those knights. And so that warrior unit was wiped out. Simultaneously afterwards, this was a large group of Huskarls, Danes, that was 8 strong, went into those knights, and essentially, I believe they lost maybe one of them, but they wiped out that unit because all the fatigue was used against them. They essentially wiped out that unit. This is the Anglo-Danish turn still. The warriors here attacked the lone last knight that was there, both using their respective fatigues against each other. That knight didn't take a casualty on the warriors, but the warriors did wipe out that knight. Now, in the Normans' turn, the crossbowmen did actually fire upon... Correction on that. What ended up happening is not enough dice were actually rolled. No dice were rolled to activate the sergeants this turn. And so the massive volley ability was played and at the beginning of the turn. Essentially the levy type units did 2 rounds of shooting on these remaining Huskarls and ended up killing 3 of them between those 2 turns. It was really quite effective shooting on them. And then the warlord did sort of retreat backwards up to here. And that's where we're at end of round 3. See you at the end of round 4. Okay, so we're at the end of round 4. Anglo-Danes really just removed fatigue and in some cases on the Huskarls and ended up moving the warriors into the wood and leaving fatigue, and the warlord has no fatigue. So really, the Anglo-Danes didn't attack this round, but they did sort of move into cover. That didn't really help them a whole lot because the Normans used their sergeants twice, 2 consecutive rounds, and killed 3 out of the 4 Huskarls that were there. And so that's kind of where we're sitting there. Not much else really happened, and so we're now going into round 5. A lot less units on the table. We're still at 11 wounds on the Anglo-Danish warlord to 10 on the Norman. See you at the end of round 5. So, not that much happened this round. End of turn 5. Anglo-Danes, the Huskarl rested and moved out to here, and actually should have a fatigue for moving twice. So yeah, because he rested a fatigue and then gains a fatigue afterwards. Warlord uses free movement to move up to here. The warriors rested. Norman levies moved up, and then as well the sergeants and the warlord move up. Now we're going into bottom of turn 6. So we're at the end of round 6. The brave Anglo-Danes Huskarl runs backwards to try to get out of range of the crossbows, which technically didn't really get out of range, but the warriors stayed within the woods, and the warlord moved up. The Danes used their dice to primarily put their stuff in their combat pool as well as shield wall. During the Norman turn, peasants moved up. The sergeants moved forward, the warlord moved forward. The warlord did attack, come around and attack the Dane warlord in single combat. Neither one ended up actually causing any wounds on each other, and so as the attacker, the Norman warlord disengaged. The sergeants did move up and fired upon the warriors within the woods. It required a movement and a shooting, and so between fatigue and also between the shield wall that the warriors in the woods formed, it just caused one casualty on the warriors. And that's where we're at the end of turn 6. So now we're going into the final round, turn 7. Okay, so we are at the end of turn 7. Very interesting ending. Essentially, Anglo-Dane warriors came up and did a Lords of Battle into the crossbowmen. Ended up killing 3 crossbowmen, and then also putting extra fatigue on them. The remaining Huskarl had moved up right next to this Danish warlord here. During the Normans' turn, the Normans did try... Anglo-Danes put some dice on intimidation. The Normans did try to do a terrified movement with the warlord, and that was stopped by intimidation. Then they used the free move from the warlord, and there was a one-on-one battle, and the Anglo-Dane did not cause any wounds on the Norman warlord. The Norman warlord caused 3. The first one is negated. The second one was taken by the Huskarl, which was next to him, because the warlord can do that, assign it. So killing that Huskarl, and then the last wound was taken on the Anglo-Dane warlord. What that did is it went from the Anglo-Dane having 11 wounds to 10, where the also the Norman warlord has 10 wounds. So given the victory conditions of the game, it is equal, in which case it's a draw. And so, very interesting battle in the way it ended. It was very much back and forth, and essentially both warlords went home feeling either both defeated or both winning, probably both winning depending on the personality. And so, hope you enjoy this battle report, and see you next time.